impressive for the co-offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach for LSU. Guys, I will continue to tell you this. When it comes to that position group, I'm not worried about that at all. Now, do you take a step back? Of course you take a step back. I mean, it's very difficult to replace Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas Jr. But there's a difference in living up to that versus having a really good wide receiver room. I think Chris Hilton is going to be a really good player for you next year, along with CJ Daniels. And you know how much I like Kyron Lacey. The development at that position under the Brian Kelly tenure, in my opinion, arguably has been the best. Now, you talk about offensive line. That is a really good observation there as well with Brad Davis. But, guys, you're talking about an elite status with an elite coach doing things and it coming to fruition in the NFL draft. Now, in reference to the draft, you know how I feel. Jayden Daniels, to me, was the number one prospect in this year's class. I don't think it's close. I don't think it was remotely close. I don't like some of the antics that Caleb Williams possesses. I think that you saw even on just the ultimate big stage of the NFL draft, just some of the corny stuff that he does. It's not me. Now, I could be wrong in this. I could be a guy that's looking into something that I have, I might be wrong. But I think that starting on Thursday, LSU was headlined because there was so much built up about Jayden Daniels that when it came to fruition that your quarterback, your Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, went number 2, it gave everybody, and really and truthfully, everything that had been said about him, quite honestly, was false. I think that Jayden's going to have the better career because I do think that, ironically, what people don't want to talk about, they do have some really good weapons at Washington. Now, can they keep him upright? Can they continue to build on that offensive line? Can he get down, stay safe? That is going to be something that Jayden Daniels is going to have to do. I think he can do it. I think he was the best player in this year's draft. How do I want to say this? I think Malik Nabers is up there with being the, or arguably the, best wide receiver in this year's class. Take your pick. And if we're just taking the LSU glasses off for a moment, to each his own. Arizona went with the bloodline and Marvin Harrison Jr. New York went with Malik Nabers. I sit here and say this. I think of all three guys, and we'll talk about Brian Thomas and the Jacksonville Jaguars in just a moment. But to me, I think that he goes in arguably the most questionable situation, mainly due to the fact that Daniel Jones is his quarterback. And I think Malik is a guy that's going to show up for you every day. He's going to compete every day. And I don't know if Malik Nabers struggles these first couple of years, I don't know if it's going to be on him. When you get drafted, it's all about situation. It's all about the current situation that you're in. And for me, I don't know how I like that situation for him. I was hoping he would go to Arizona because I do think Kyler's a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. But Saquon Barkley's not there, and I do think that they're going to have to throw the ball more than people are understanding at the current moment. So maybe it does benefit Malik Nabers. Now, Brian Daboll is a really good offensive mind and offensive coach. Can he scheme? Can he get the ball out very quickly to Malik Nabers because he's the best yak wide receiver in this year's class? Let's hope that it pans out. But the last time that the Giants took a wide receiver in round 1 from LSU, it bowed out well for him, and they probably should have kept Odell even with some of his crazy antics, punching a kicking net. Who gives a Rudy Poo? Odell was pretty freaking good. Let's hope it plays out for Malik. Brian Thomas Jr. at 23 to Jacksonville. I think right now, day one, all at the jump, is arguably and probably is the best fit of the 3 in the first round. Guys, you can think what you want about Trevor Lawrence. He got hurt last year. He tried to come back. It didn't bode well for him. But you look at a guy like Brian Thomas going to Jacksonville. I think Doug Peterson's a really good coach. I think he's a really good offensive coach. And he's pairing up with a really good quarterback. The question becomes, look, Jacksonville has had moments where they've struggled offensively under Doug Peterson, but they've had guys that made it to a playoffs with Doug Peterson as well. I think he's the ultimate guy that can take the top off. You got Christian Kirk that's already there as well. They have a really good core and nucleus of young guys on that offense. It's a really good pickup. Really, really good pickup for Jacksonville. I think Brian Thomas goes into a situation that is arguably the best right now. It's why Jacksonville was picking at 23. So I like that addition of Brian Thomas. Let me say this before we get to before we wrap this up very quickly. Jacksonville must love them some LSU players. Now, Doug Peterson has deep Louisiana ties here, so he might know a little bit more than most about LSU. I told you this last Wednesday. I was not shocked that Maason Smith went in the second round. You and I had a discussion that there was a lot of chatter of him potentially moving himself into the first round, but he goes to Jacksonville in the second. Guys, good for Maason Smith. I think that if you look back on it, and he would probably agree with this, his LSU career, considering where we wanted it to be and how it wanted to be and how I'm sure he wanted it to be, was a little bit of a disappointment. And I don't mean that in the wrong way. Look, he didn't want to get hurt, right? It wasn't on him that he wanted to get hurt. But even coming into last year at a high ankle sprain. But Gus was injured as a freshman, which a lot of people forget that he missed multiple games as a freshman from injury. I think it's a very high risk, high reward for Jacksonville. And I think that he's in a place where maybe he can develop because they don't necessarily at the jump need him. But I do think that he's in a place where he can get a little bit better, develop maybe through a year, and go that route. They also took Jordan Jefferson. I think Jordan Jefferson plays quicker, in my opinion, than Maason Smith does, because every team, and you can talk to any of your buddies that are scouts, you can talk to any of your buddies that are coaches, when you have a guy that can just go in on 2 downs and stop the run, guys, they're a dime a dozen. Block eaters is what they call them. I think that Jordan Jefferson can be in a place where he sees more early snaps and early downs for Jacksonville because he can eat at those blocks. I'm not saying Maason Smith can't, but we've seen it more from Jordan Jefferson. I like both of those guys going there. The ironic piece in all of this is that they're joining back up with Matt House. That's the worst part in all of this. I do think it's interesting, though. What are those conversations like in the hallway? Who knows if Matt House didn't vouch for them? Now, Matt House blocked half of the LSU fan base, so we'll never know because he's soft. I mean, guys, it's soft. I mean, I get hate mail all the live long day throughout the day. So what? People call for you being fired. You got a $2 million buyout. Suck it up, Buttercup. I don't mean that in the wrong way. Stop being a little pansy. Who knows, though, if Matt House gave or put in a good word for both of those guys. Maybe he did. I think clearly they asked. Clearly they asked Matt House what he thought of those two guys. I would assume that he gave a pretty good assessment of those two because just the simple fact that they drafted them. So Jacksonville taking 3 LSU Tigers. Just 3 teams, man. You got to be a Commanders fan now, a Bengals fan now. You got to be a Jacksonville fan now to some extent because there's so many guys on there. So, yeah, good for those 2 guys. Here is the biggest thing before we get to a little baseball, and I might have to push that because Carter Bryant's joined us in 2 minutes. And I am talking about baseball here, or will talk about baseball here today. I know that there was a lot of questions about Makai Wingo, and I had a lot of questions. I never remotely thought that Makai Wingo would fall as much as he did, but he did. And it's a shame. I do think that his medicals came vastly in play here. But Detroit did what Detroit does under Dan Campbell, man. I'm a Dan Campbell homer. I know he's a Texas A&M guy. I don't care. I am a Dan Campbell homer. They draft really good football players. They don't necessarily worry about the height, the size, the weight, the 40 time, the bench press. They go and draft football players. There's a reason they're a playoff team. Is because this is what happens when we evaluate players. This happens at the high school level. This happens at the college level. We look at the numbers. We look at how fast they run a 40. We look how big their broad jump or vertical is. We look at how big their bench press is. You can never change what somebody does on the field. Now, I hate that Mekhi fell that far. I know that he's got to be very frustrated. I have been told that his medicals were a massive concern, and that is why he fell. I also was told by someone in the NFL that they did not like what happened at the end of the year with the situation with Matt House. That's laziness on their part to say that because Matt House was a piece of shit. I'll say it. I mean, I'll call him what he is now that he's being petty to the entire fan base. He was a piece of shit. I don't care who knows it. So, happy for Makai Wingo. I think that Detroit got another steal there, and we'll see. But let me wrap this all up into one little bow here before we get to Carter Bryant. Guys, you had 3 defensive linemen drafted this past week in the NFL draft. The biggest weakness that you have on this LSU football team right now is on the defensive line. It is a very crucial week when you and I talk about the interior of this defensive line. Now, I do think it's ironic that it's the position group that you are hurting at the most that you had 3 guys drafted. Guys, you're fringing on being a 9-3, 10-2 team based off of one position. So, when you had that many guys drafted at one position and you have not been reloading there, it can be a massive issue. That is not having a D-line coach at a consistent basis is coming to a head now. A lot like what the offensive line was until Brad Davis got here. Now you just hope that Bo can rebuild it. It's going to take him time. He's not a miracle worker. And every LSU fan that says, oh, it's okay, we have Bo Davis. It's not just a Bo Davis thing. Bo's got to be involved. Baker's got to be involved. Kelly's got to be highly involved here. It doesn't fall just all on him. So you have arguably the number 1 interior defensive tackle in this spring window on campus right now. Can you close? We'll talk about it with Carter Bryant next. Let's get to a quick commercial. Let's get to a quick break. Carter Bryant, I'm glad he's joining us. I'm excited because we had a new, the game was on, then the game just gets canceled. And so, it's rough around here in these people's streets.